We'll get into our preferred lineups now with Pete Alonso back into the mix. Maybe it does change, but obviously they're going to be testing a few things out. I think we know at this point what the top two is going to be. There are some pieces that I feel like are kind of solidified into the lineup right now, whether we like it or not. Obviously, there is a preference of who I would prefer to have playing. We have kind of come from a more similar range. You and like ours are pretty similar. Obviously, it's very easy to set these things up, especially when you have guys like Lindor and Soto at the top there. Whatever perspective that we have them from, I think that the lineup definitely can be installed in a way that you have threats throughout, at minimum, the first and the second inning. And that's something that we have not really been able to say recently, as for hot streaks and cold streaks and things like that with an established bat such as Juan Soto there. So Frank, I'll let you go first. I think we pretty much have like the exact same here, except a little bit of a switch in Alonso and Nimmo, but I do want to know the thought process here. Guys, let us know which lineup you do like better at this current moment going into opening day. Let's say right now we're having this in mind with facing a right-handed starter, because there is something that has to say with that, of course, with Jesse Winker being here, mainly hitting right-handed pitching. But Frank, you can do a little bit of a rundown of your preferred lineup as of right now.
I went with the righty-lefty thing. I feel like the guy who really, it was toughest to find a spot for him is Nimmo. We both feel that Brandon Nimmo, his best spot is leading off, but with what happened last year with Lindor, you cannot take him at that leadoff spot. Like, it Absolutely is just not an option. He was, like we said, once he switched to that leadoff spot, he was MVP caliber. So I don't want to do that. And then for Pete, we've talked about the success that he's had in that 2-hole before. So, like a thought was, maybe you could go something like Lindor, Alonso, Soto. Like that would have been interesting. But I feel like they just paid so much for Soto that he has to bat second. So like you paid him so much that he needs to get a lot of ABs. And then, when it came to Alonso, it's like I just wasn't sure how I felt about there's a few things that I had in mind here. So if you put Nimmo third, what I didn't like was having Alonso and Vientos back to back. I just feel like they have too much similarities, like we were talking about with that chasing and like those pitches on the outside corner. So I felt like if you had something where it's like you have a hitter that like is a little more balanced than Juan Soto, a little more disciplined, then you have Pete who's more aggressive, then Nimmo who's more conservative, and then you have Vientos who's like more aggressive when it comes to swinging the bat and just kind of alternating that back and forth. Then with Winker, I just felt like it would make things a little tougher for a pitcher. And also just like when you're coming into a game, it's like, oh, well, they stacked the left-handers. Let me go to my lefty now. I just feel like it's very hard. We have like each hitter is like a little different as far as like they alternate their play style. And then like same thing goes like with McNeil in series. So I just feel like this kind of lineup that I put together, I just feel like it makes it a little tougher for pitchers where they have that situation we've seen the Mets have like the bases loaded and nobody out, and they only get like one run out of it because everyone strikes out. I just feel like when you balance it like this and you have these contact hitters and these power hitters and these on base guys in between the power hitters, I feel like it's just make for not like getting stuck and just like being in a rut like we've seen them before.
Yeah, I mean, I really do value like the protection of which opportunities you get for overall damage. As for who gets the most amount of plate appearances, obviously we look at it from the top part of this lineup to get the most situational opportunities. Yes, there is Francisco Lindor, who was big for us down the stretch. Juan Soto, we already know what he is capable of. He will 100% be a huge contributor in this lineup, and I don't see him slowing down anytime soon in his career, obviously him being 26 years old. But Brandon Nimmo is the best situational hitter on this team and was last year in 2024, even though he was not great. He definitely came through when you really needed him in those high leverage situations. Didn't he lead the team in runs batted in? I'm pretty sure for like the whole year or
he
for
did.
quite a while.
I feel like Lindor eventually probably gave him a little bit of a run there, but Nimmo, I mean, he was just so strong in the first half that second half really kind of messed up what he was off to a phenomenal start. I mean, we had said that Nimmo should have been the all-star over Alonso, and Lindor finished with one more RBI than Nimmo did.
And we all know that Francisco Lindor was struggling towards a decent part of that first half as well. So obviously he got on that incredible tear, helped us get to the postseason. The thing is that when I look at my lineup, of course, thought as of right now, your best hitter is in the 2 spot, which means that they're pretty much in the middle of everything. They get possibly the most plate appearances, of course, with your leadoff hitter being able to be a guy who can work counts. We know that Francisco Lindor, being the leadoff hitter that he was able to play a little bit more of a balanced game. He was not in the center of everything, but then he brought himself into the center by not being in the center, if that makes sense. As for 3, I see this as the most balanced hitter on the team. Whether you're talking about this from overall platoons of a guy who can hit left-handed pitching and right-handed pitching, we know that Brandon Nimmo has been good from both of those platoons. Whether you're talking about it from last year where he struggled a little bit, but it seems like he really, at any opportunity, could break through. We saw that the power recently has definitely climbed through. Obviously, Brandon Nimmo coming off of a struggling end to the season is probably the main reason as to why Mets fans don't want to see him in that 3 spot. But overall, when it comes to situationally, overall balance of what he can provide, I believe that Brandon Nimmo is the perfect 3-hole hitter at this current moment. And then also I have a little bit more of that PTSD of Pete Alonso, kind of lowering him to that cleanup lineup, as I feel like he's just become a little bit more of a cleanup hitter recently. I understand that he was not great with men on base, of course, but I just think that right now it's just become pretty much strictly power with him, and maybe there's a way that he heats up and there's a little bit more of an approach there, but I do want to see his discipline or his lack thereof of discipline kind of be protected in this way. But I also want to protect Mark Vientos from a sophomore slump as best as I can. And I have to put Mark Vientos afterwards because I do want to put him in there, but I don't want to put the full-on year that he had onto center stage because of the adjustments that pitchers do make to him. And maybe he does make adjustments fine and you can move him up in the lineup, but I also want to kind of protect him as to where he likes to swing a lot with, of course, somebody like Jesse Winker, of course, which I think is a really, really good way to protect that type of ability. We've talked about power protection before, of protecting Pete, protecting this guy, protecting that way. I think that it also does go both ways with guys who, again, like you said as well, guys who chase, guys who have these types of tendencies to not give us competitive ABs sometimes. And I won't, appoint it to who possibly could be the problem in that way to a certain extent. But even though Jeff McNeil has not been fantastic, and I do not want Jeff McNeil in this opening day lineup, when it comes to Pete Alonso or Mark Vientos, guys ahead of him, someone's going to have to pitch to someone when it comes to Pete Alonso and Vientos. And I understand the lefty righty type of thing. And I kind of wanted to mix that in because, again, if we were just talking about pure power, Francisco Alvarez probably would be moved up to 6th in this regard. Constructing this in this way, I feel like the best way to talk about a fluent offense and not a streaky offense, for me, I want to protect the flaws with the non-flaws of the next guy. Like, that's my whole thought of it, and I feel like the Mets that have a little bit deeper of a lineup right now, if all goes well, again, and there are other options if they have a struggling part in this lineup, looking at you, Jeff McNeil, looking at you, Jose Siri, as a possibility. But I really think that it can definitely be protected one by one of these types of weaknesses to kind of maximize this overall as a team. And that's kind of how I'm looking at it from the overall protection. And then also you have a little bit more of a balance of left-handed hitters here. You also can hopefully limit a little bit more of the opportunities to chase pitches in the other batter's box, specifically from secondary stuff and those sliders that killed us. I don't know if that makes sense, Frank, but I think that we're pretty much coming up from the same angle. Some people are saying they agree with me. Some people are saying they agree with you. It's not that big of a change. I just don't want to see Brandon Nimmo as the cleanup hitter just because he was the RBI leader for quite a while. I kind of see the third hitter as more of the more balanced hitter that can kind of, maneuver things. I think Pete Alonso at this current moment, he's not the best hitter in the lineup. Juan Soto is. You can argue, in my opinion, overall balance. There's Brandon Nimmo there. Francisco Lindor, of course, in the leadoff spot. So I would say that Pete Alonso right now, at the trajectory that we're going, cleanup's probably the best position for him. I don't know if that's what you believe. I just don't see Brandon Nimmo as a guy to provide that type of cleanup type of tendencies. I just see him more as the balance guy of, you need this, let's do this. Even though he struggled. Again, I'm not opposed to it, and I'm okay with splitting the lefty-righty if you want to do something like that. But I think that Brandon Nimmo has shown that he's the most balanced hitter in this lineup, and when he's right, they should give him an overall chance to do that. And Pete Alonso just seems like more of a cleanup hitter as time goes by. Going into his 30s, I think it just profiles better that way. Maybe he bounced back, who knows, but that's kind of my thought on this overall lineup. I just think Nimmo is just better situationally.
I just have Nimmo where he is because of the fit of who's around him. So, I mean, again, to go back to Vientos, I mean, when you're talking about a strikeout percentage in the 8th percentile, I mean, that's not ideal right after Pete Alonso. I mean, Nimmo, he struck out more than usual, but still he's someone that he doesn't chase, and he still draws a lot of walks. So I just felt like Alonso and Vientos, it just would have been too much when it came to the strikeouts. So, I mean, I just thought that it was a bit risky to have those two guys back-to-back when I know that Soto's getting on a lot, Lindor's on a lot. And then if you had Nimmo from I just know like they're going to have opportunities, so I can't have guys striking out when there's men on base. So I feel like, you know, with, let's say Lindor's on, Soto's on, if Alonso messes up, okay, well, at least Nimmo's after him. And like you said, he was the Mets' best guy running scoring position, batted. I was looking at it. It was just, I mean, some absolutely really good numbers. 319 with runners in scoring position, 299 with men on. So, I mean, OPS over 1,000 runners in scoring position. And that was with him batting like under 200 in the entire second half just in general. So he was insane with men on base. So I feel like in a cleanup spot, he's still going to have a lot of opportunities because he's still going to be batting like shortly after Lindor and Soto. So I feel like no matter what, Nimmo is still going to get plenty of opportunities to drive in runs. And again, just how he fits with how the kind of player Alonso is, with the kind of player Vientos is, I feel like just sandwiching him right in between them, I felt it was just the best overall fit for who's around him.
I think that there's two different angles here of like protecting this in some way. I think that I've kind of soured off of the Pete Alonso at the 2-hole, obviously, because we kind of viewed him as the best hitter on this team or the most damage, fiend part of this team. Right now, that's not really the case, and it's kind of just more of this complimentary cleanup hitter type of guy that he is, and I feel like that's just the best way for him to be suited in that way. But I understand the back-to-back chasing that you could get from a guy like Mark Vientos and Pete Alonso in that way. If it's 2 outs types of things, it's all really just the overall situational hitting that needs to get better and was streaky last year. So hopefully the deepness of this lineup can be constructed in that way. I really do more prefer protecting Vientos's flaws as compared to Pete Alonso's flaws, only because you have ways to set things up to the cleanup position with somebody like Pete Alonso, who we've seen drive in runs before. And also, if we were to get somewhat of production close to 2022 production, no matter what, no matter where he is batting, he's going to have to lay off that outside slider, because he had over 200 swings at a down and away pitch. Like, he was an absolute liability in that way. So I'm not saying that it's going to completely go away. Obviously, he's older. There's still the concerns. He wasn't great last year, and that was the main reason as to why his market took so long and why it dipped. But either way, no matter what, whether there's somebody batting behind him, I feel like it's better just to have power protection for Alonso than situational protection, because Pete Alonso is going to have to be in those situations, whether Soto and Lindor or Nimmo is hot or not. They're going to have to rely on him as a guy to give you the secondary source, of course, of whether it is overall situational guys, whether you're talking about it from comparison to Nimmo or Soto. Again, you're going to need Pete Alonso in that certain cleanup position. I see the cleanup position now, with how this roster now is with Juan Soto here, the cleanup position more, I feel like, is just a guy who's looking to mash. And that's really the Pete Alonso type of MO here. The approach is going to have to change no matter what happens. I'd rather have the veteran in Pete Alonso try to figure it out than the youngster in Mark Vientos that pitchers are already making adjustments to after the year that he just had, first full season that he just had. I'm trying to prevent a sophomore slump as best as I can and not shedding a light on Mark Vientos last year, our second best hitter. Let's put him in the 3-hole. Let's put him in the 4-hole. Like I don't want to put him in that spotlight because I want to see him sustain into the hitter that we know that he can be after what he showed us last year. We've seen guys flip-flop from years to years. We've seen it happen before, so I'm not trying to put it on full blast of Mark Vientos because we know the bat is there, but I don't want to have Mark Vientos in those certain situations where we get a slump because his chasing tendencies are still very, very high. And they were last year. There's tons of swing and miss there. But we all know that if he gets those pitches, he's going to make some really loud contact no matter what.
You really want, like I said, it's important for the player development just to see what happens. But I think overall, like we said, it is a fluid situation where it's like guys could be moved around as needed. Like if Nemo struggles again, like he could be lowered. And if Alvarez gets it going, he could be, like you said, he could be moved up. Or like anyone besides Lindor and Soto could basically be moved. I mean, if you wanted to do something like, you could do like Lindor, Nemo, Soto. Like you could try something like that too. Yeah. Like put Nemo back in the top half. Let him, because I feel like Nemo, like he's still trying to decide where he's at. Because like he was a leadoff hitter for so many years. Now you moved him to the middle of the order, and he's like trying to become a power hitter, but he couldn't really sustain it. So I feel like he's kind of in a tough spot right now too. So maybe it'd be best to kind of move him back to like a table setter role, like where he's accustomed to.
Maybe.
So I mean that's something for them to consider as well.
The overall balance of Brandon Nimmo, like I have said, with his overall contributes to the lineup, and that's what I really, really liked. I look at it more of what we saw in 2023, of course, with the career high in home runs from the leadoff spot, of course, which it would be a little bit different. But I feel like it just gets stabilized better with him batting behind Soto as to where, he can just do his thing no matter what. And maybe there is a way as to where they set up Pete Alonso a little bit better. Maybe we do see more stolen bases from Brandon Nimmo. If that foot heals, I don't think we're going to get it. But we got 15 last year from him with a foot injury for half of the year. So I don't know how many of those stolen bases were in the second half. There probably weren't many because he was really grimacing. And
said that his injury did not happen until later in the season. He was actually 50-50.
Yeah.
So it was 8 stolen bases in the first half, 7 in the second half.
Okay. Interesting. So we'll see.
And even like we talked about, I mean, the RBIs, though, I mean, that's really where we see the difference. I mean, he had 63 in the first half compared to 27 in the second half. So that was quite a big disparity there.
As the time has gone on, the trajectory of things, Brandon Nimmo has hit the ball harder than Pete Alonso at 50th percentile recently. So again, I feel like there is power there, but there's also contact. Like again, he can add the power as compared to his hit tool overall with Brandon Nimmo because he's just the most balanced hitter in this lineup. And that's where I feel like this is the best way to put in this situation of the 3-hole, because usually the 2-hole and 3-hole hitters are the guys that get the most of these high leverage situations. I don't know if this is just more of me just seeing PTSD from what Pete Alonso was able to do. And even though he has that pillow as to where there's not much pressure on him and he gets a second chance of life, like I said, I feel like there is a way as to where Pete Alonso just right now, it's comfortable. It's a comfortable position for him to produce the best from the cleanup spot with Juan Soto here being the overall impact bat that he is. Now, if we were talking about another type of bat that's here, like let's say Anthony Santander was here, or let's say they signed Jorge Soler or something like that, probably would be a different type of thought. But when it comes to Juan Soto, he's so freaking good that he can stabilize so many different things. And I feel like if you were to split up somebody like Alonso and Soto, who are definitely different types of hitters, and you balance Brandon Nimmo in the middle of it, I think that there's definitely a feel as to where you can have a little bit more consistent offense, deepens the lineup a little bit more, and you also, in between deepening the lineup, you don't have complete non-competitive hitters. Now, the bottom part of the lineup is a wait and see. who knows what's going to happen. They do have the possible reinforcements if that does happen. We already know that there's someone we will talk about. Let's say if Jeff McNeil struggles, there probably will be some playing time there for somebody like Luis Angel Acuna. Jose Siri and Tyrone Taylor as the possible platoon. You can, try to get more playing time out of somebody like Drew Gilbert. It all is very, very flexible in that way from the bottom part of the order. And then it's also flexible from the top because you have a lot of competitive hitters, which is really, really good. And something we haven't seen for a long, long time for the Mets. Was 06 probably the deepest lineup compared to this one? I'd say that going forward.
It's different because there was also the pitcher hitting back then in 2006.
There was.
So, I mean, automatically, you already have a bit of an advantage to how you can construct lineups. I will say that, on paper, 06 is better, but I mean, the team has potential. Like, if Alvarez is anywhere close to his best version, and then the real big one is if McNeil is anywhere close to what he's capable of, I mean, this line could become very, very good. But that's just a matter of it's been a while now, so we'll see. I mean, there's no guarantees there, so it's going to be kind of a wait and see. And then with Siri, I mean, he's just very hit or miss. I mean, he's kind of an all or nothing player. So, the games where Siri hits home runs are games the Mets will probably do really well. But the games where he strikes out a few times, those games can be a little tougher, So I think that's going to be interesting. Even this Marte thing, it doesn't help because, I mean, one of the things you consider is okay, well, maybe Marte pinch hits for Siri later in the game, but then it's you bring Taylor in, but what's Marte really going to be providing at that point? We don't know. We'll see if that's something they get done at some point, but even something maybe Acuna pinch hits for him or one of these guys just off the bench as another option. Let's say you started against a lefty, so you had Marte starting Winker off the bench late in the game. Winker pinch hits for Siri, and then Taylor comes in as the defensive replacement. So, you can have those opportunities where 1 through 9 it'll look a little stronger. But I mean, just overall, just going based off what we project, what we think is going to happen, I wouldn't say it's quite as good, but I mean, it does have potential.
Want to be a part of our show? Send us a voicemail via our brand new 24/7 hotline for our podcast. Dial 845-208-5677. That's 845-208-5677. And your message could be featured in the next live episode of the Mets Weekly Podcast.